Good evening, folks. It's good to see everybody here tonight. We're going to start with number 15, Step by Step. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to walk in your ways, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all of my days, and I will follow you all of my days, and I will follow you all of my days, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all of my days.
Father, we thank you for the opportunity we have to be here tonight. Father, I just ask that you will bless all of those who are less fortunate than us. Father, pray especially for Paula's mom, that you be with the doctors as they minister to her. Father, help us to reach out in our community here and love, lift up those that are hurting. Father, we thank you so much for the peace we have that comes from your Holy Spirit. Father, pray that you will help us to empty ourselves daily so your Spirit will fill us more. Pray that you be with us as we continue to worship. Father, we love you. We love your Son. Thank you, Jesus, for laying your life down for each of us. In Christ's name.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Want to say some quick announcements. One is I was made aware there was a black Ford SUV with its inside lights on out parked over here. So if that's your vehicle, we'll all look away for the time being, but if you need to go get that, that's there. Also, want to commend you all. Apparently tonight we raised $2,551 for the Honduras meal. So thank you all for coming and participating in that, and thank you, Miss Leah, for putting that together as well. And then two more announcements. I know I'm on a roll. One, Ladies Retreat is coming up. If you need to pay for a t-shirt or any other thing, go to Miss Jody Gore. Again, Ladies Retreat, and you need to pay something, go to Miss Jody Gore. And then last but not least, we have a preaching candidate coming this weekend. Make sure we have a few events where you can get a chance to meet him and his family. Please try to be a part of that. All right, so as we're getting into our little brief thought before Bible class tonight, I want to talk about peace. It's something I feel like we all want to have in our lives, especially when it seems like the world and all its chaos, when it seems like there's just one thing after another, when it seems like there's a hardship. We all are searching for peace. And I want to tell a quick story in Judges chapter 6. It's the story of Gideon. And to summarize his story real fast, he is, I believe, sifting through wheat in an old wine area, cellar cave type thing. And he's doing that, and an angel of the Lord appears before him and says, "O mighty man of valor." He talks to him not into what he was at the moment, because he was a man hiding from persecution, a man kind of fearful, laying low, lowest in his family, in a low family, and yet this angel sees and calls him mighty man of valor, not what he is at the moment, but what he can be. And he says, "Peace be to you." In a moment where Gideon's kind of got a lot of things going on. And the words that is used there for the Lord is Jehovah Shalom. And it basically means the Lord is peace. Shalom is a common word that The Jewish people, even today, used to greet one another just to say, peace be with you, brother, Abat Shalom. And so, peace. Where can we get peace in our lives? Where can we find this peace that surpasses understanding? And so, basically in this moment where this angel comes before Gideon, Gideon brings this meal before him, and this angel just basically fries and cooks the meal with this strange fire, and he realizes who God is there, and what was there. That was an angel. And then so Gideon gets this altar and puts it there and builds it and names it peace, God's peace. And so then we see the Jehovah Shalom. He saw the power and felt the peace of God. And peace comes from God, peace is of God, and God is peace. So if you're wanting to find peace in your life, if you're wanting to find a calmness, we can't find it in anything this world provides, because the world only provides more chaos and more stresses. But it comes from God. So where do we lean when we're stressed, overwhelmed, feel lost? The answer is God, because God is peace. I can't help but also think of the story from Mark 8 and many other of the Gospels of Jesus calming the storm. He says, quiet to the storm. He says, peace, be still. And the storm calmed, and the waters stopped waving. It was peaceful. How do we receive peace? How do we get peace? It's from Jesus' power. It's from God's power. He brought peace to the storm. Jesus didn't just command it. He is peace, so he brought peace to that situation. So I don't know what storms are going on in your life. I don't know what you're feeling, if you're feeling stressed or worried about things, but if you want peace in your life, the only place you can really, truly get it is from God and his Son. And the peace that they provide, the confidence they give. We can lean on so many other things besides that, but I promise you, in a world where I feel like there's one little problem or stress after another, 2 or 3 times a week, I don't know how your week or life or month is, but sometimes it feels like there's a lot of stressful things, and then sometimes it feels like it's not many. But in this world where there are so many stresses, don't lean on these other things, but lean on God. Lean on Jesus and look for the peace that he provides. If in your life you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, worried, if you feel a low point, whatever you feel, just know that we are here. God is here. If you need to start your journey, if you simply need prayers, if you just are feeling overwhelmed and are seeking peace, please come. As together we stand and sing.
O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart? Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great a teacher, at this time we'll go ahead and ask you to go to your class and get ready for your lesson this evening as we sing number 464, Because He Lives. We'll sing the first and last verse. God sent His Son, they called Him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to show my Savior lives. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow
Good evening.
Check, check. Check. Check, 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 check. Got it? If I put it right here, I can hear it. It's wireless SLXD1, if that helps you. Okay, you got it now? Yeah, sounds good.
Well, I don't know how tonight's going to go. You know, I guess a couple weeks ago, we had a class that is really cognitive, and I had an abnormal amount of people that came up to me afterwards and said, "Great class," and I get really cynical about that. I read that as poor Brandon. He bombed up there, but you know, I don't want him to feel bad. But there's some verses I really want to wrestle with tonight. So it's going to be a little bit more of that. If y'all remember that class, it's going to be a little more like that. I really want to think about these two chapters in two verses and maybe wrestle with some things that we haven't spent time with yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and warn you, when I get like this, I know what I want to talk about, but I don't really know how to make it flow. So it's kind of like having a puzzle with missing pieces, and you're just going to have to fill in the pieces. So I know that it feels late. We're in fall, and it's dark, and it's easy to get tired, but I'm going to need energy and your involvement tonight. So bear with me. We had Halloween Monday. I saw some interesting people that give away different candy and stuff. This one, take one bag of Sprite. So I don't know if anybody tried that. Give out bags of Sprite. It is fall, like I mentioned, so there's pumpkin spice everything. Make sure if you get your oil changed that you get the pumpkin spice version of that. I don't have great ones tonight. This is the just okay corral. Meh. This one I like. Follow your heart. False. The heart is deceitful above all things. Follow Jesus. So next time somebody says, "I'm following my heart," you can quote this if you're a fan of The Office. And I did have one joke that I liked, but there wasn't an image to go with it. But it's two antennas met on a roof, and they fell in love and they got married. The ceremony was not much, but the reception was excellent. So.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's pretty bad, yeah. So, John, share your spoiler alert with us, if you will.
Okay. Of course, these spoiler alerts are for you folks that are not retired yet. All of us retired folks, we already know these. I'm going to give you two tonight. One of them is, we've covered so much and been all around it, but I just want to go ahead and say it. You may stop working, but you won't stop spending. So, for all you young folks, go ahead and prepare now. If you need to, see your financial advisor and get you a plan going so that when you get here, you'll be prepared. And the other one I want to give that's another spoiler alert is, you might think, yay, I get to stay up late at night. I don't have to worry about getting up early in the morning. It's going to be great. Well, by the time you retire, you're getting older, and you don't want to stay up late anymore. You look forward to that when you're young, but when you get there, it's like, it's 8:30. It seems like it's 10 o'clock. I got to get ready for bed. That's the way it is around our house, anyway. And something nice, something good that you may not have thought about is you have more time to help others and receive the blessing that goes along with your good deeds. So that's a good thing. You have more time to help other folks, and that's good. Okay, so much for the sport. Oh, one more thing. I'm not going to do any more spoiler alerts. I need y'all to do the spoiler alerts. We've got, what, three more
classes.
Three more classes. I want y'all to come up. Some of you retired folks, what has happened in your life after you retired that you really didn't expect? And let us know. So I'll be asking for volunteers next week and the 2 weeks following that. Okay.
I heard this story once. An older guy was saying that when he was a kid, all the things that were a punishment to him, you can't go to this party, you can't stay out past 10, you know, when he got grounded, that was a punishment. He said, as he got older, the punishment was the complete opposite. If you were going to punish him, you'd say, well, you have to go to that party. That's your punishment. Or you can't come home before 10 o'clock. You got to stay out late. So that kind of reminds me of your spoiler alert. So there's two questions I want us to wrestle with tonight. We're covering chapters 10 and 11. And these are sort of the themes of the chapters. The first one is, can I please God? And the other one is, can I enjoy myself? Can I enjoy my life? And I really want us to think about this as one question. And this is where I think it's going to take some wrestling. Can I do both of these things simultaneously? And I guess before we even get into it, does anyone have initial thoughts on that? So I'll share some. Oh, Mike?
Well, I think it's possible to do both simultaneously.
Okay.
Can I please God? Well, you got to work at it, but yes, you can. And can I enjoy myself in my life? Yeah, I think God wants you to enjoy yourself. But he also tests you as well. He'll put obstacles in your way, and you got to learn how to deal with obstacles.
Okay, very good. So it is possible. There will be obstacles, though. And I do think that this question on its surface, I want to say, is an easy question. But the more I dig into it and wrestle with it, I'm kind of like Mike. You know, I start out with, yeah, it's possible. But all of a sudden, all these little hurdles come into play. If you have this magnet, I'm going to use this magnet, a car magnet, as an example, but I don't mean anything negative about it. So be gracious with me. But I have a friend at work who has a magnet on his car that says, he died for me, so I'll live for him. Has anybody seen that? There's nothing wrong with that. But as I'm thinking about this, and I read into everything, the more you get to know me, you'll realize I read into everything you tell me and how your body language is. I do that way too much. But as I read that statement, I can't help but think there's some sort of tone as I'm reserving my, what am I trying to say, John?
You're giving up something to do that.
Right. It's a burden.
Yeah.
It's a burden. I have to do this. It's out of obligation. He did this for me, so I'm obligated to do this for him. And I don't know. What do you all think about that before we dig in tonight? Yeah, Mike?
Look at it this way. Look at what Jesus had to go through. There's no amount of obstacles that will ever equal what Jesus Christ went through. So,
yeah, it's a good point to put in perspective. We certainly can't compare ourselves with what Christ did for us. Thank you.
You know, I was going to say, to please God, well, Jesus told us he wants us to bear our cross and follow him. And there's going to be suffering, and there's going to be times of tribulation. And so when you think about, bearing a cross, carrying that cross and suffering and what have you, then you think to yourself, well then, how am I going to be enjoying myself? And I think one thing we need to keep in mind, is not to say we can't enjoy ourselves, but there's going to be a lot of times when we're not going to be enjoying ourselves if we're truly Christians. And I think the thing we need to focus on is the big scheme, the big picture. Because our life here on this earth is nothing compared to all eternity.
Yeah, great point. I think we had some class in the summer with some of the college kids, and we were talking about, this is a thing, I may have said it in here before, but there's an old show called Parks and Rec, and they have an episode there about treat yourself. That's what did I already share this with this class? If I heard it in this? No. Okay. So, but that's the world, but the Bible tells us deny yourself, not treat yourself. So just like you said, pick up your cross and carry it. There certainly is a dying to our own self, dying to our own will. And I appreciate the wrestling with that. Because I think we do unfortunately, we live in a world of extremes. It's either 100% this way or 100% that way, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. So good thoughts. The first topic there is the title of chapter 10. I am old, can I please God? And the verse for this chapter is 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 4. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God who tests our hearts. I think that second part is something as we were going through this, remember that magnet statement. Remember this second part. We're not trying to please people, but God who tests our hearts. We've kind of talked about that, obstacles. Mr. Whiting in the chapter talks about different ways to please God. We've covered some of these. We talked last week a little bit about prayer life and how impactful that really is. And he mentions here a battle for prayer time. John, you're retired now. You have free time technically, but because you don't have work time, but you're also going all the time. I know that. Mr. Whiting mentioned it was hard to, when you're working, you kind of tell yourself, I'm going to have a better prayer life when I hit this milestone. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, have you experienced something similar?
Yeah, you do have more time. You're not always in a rush. I know when I was working, I would use a lot of my drive time for prayer time. And but now that I'm free, it can be any time. It's just whenever the notion strikes you. It doesn't have to be some formal, moment where every day you stop at this time. It can be any time. And you have the freedom to enjoy that. So I'm curious if you found it to where, in a way you almost had, obviously you were very intentional of using your driving time as prayer time. When you didn't have that anymore, was that a challenge to be intentional about it, or was it a seamless? I guess it was, actually, because that was a good time to do that, Mm-hmm. It was a good time to do that. And now then that it can be most any time, that intentional time piece is sort of gone. Mm-hmm. That's true.
John, what I think you're saying too, when you're in that work mode, time is pretty much structured, and it's difficult to designate specific times to do specific things. Being retired, it wasn't so much the challenge of finding that time to pray, but the things that you said that just kind of pop into your mind. That to me is that attitude of praying without ceasing. And it's not so much that you're just constantly saying a prayer all the time. It's just the opportunity seems to avail itself more often. Mm-hmm. And it's an opportune time, whatever thought process is. But I went through 10 of those today and saw the benefit of that prayer time on a phone call back to me. I was hoping for it, but didn't expect it. That was the reward for that praying without ceasing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, this idea of, this is what this chapter is about, is being intentional about how to please God. And I do like how you mentioned this praying without ceasing. I like what John said too. I think in a way it takes the formality of it out of the equation, and it just opens it up to different opportunities. Joe?
I do like John did. I had about a 45-minute to a 60-minute drive for work. And that was my prayer time. And in the evening, I had the same thing. That was prayer time. But like Dave, as you get older, you forget things. They come to you at odd times. Something will trigger it, and you'll go, ooh. The pray without ceasing thing, I tend to do now short prayers, and you know what? I believe God understands that. And I believe He accepts that, the fact that I forgot that when I prayed this morning. I need to get this tacked on there. Because I think when you tell somebody I'll be praying for you, that's a commitment you've made. Between you and God and you and that person, you better be doing that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you asked earlier, can I enjoy life? A lot of that depends on where you take your joy from. What gives me joy?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I can enjoy life. Sometimes I need to be sure that the correct things give me joy, and that I'm not taking joy from things that I shouldn't be taking joy from.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe, something that you mentioned, I think when I get a text from someone that says, I'll be praying for you, it's different than when I get a text from someone that said, hey, I wanted you to know I prayed for you this morning. That doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Y'all probably feel the same way, I guess, but it just feels different, Paul?
Just building a little bit on what Joe said, if you're praying throughout the day, I think that's what God is talking about when He says pray without ceasing. I don't think it means continual 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think it means you're in a prayerful mind all the time. You're ready at any point to stop what you're doing, or in John's case, you didn't stop driving, but you were not listening to the radio or anything else. You were praying because that was what was on your heart to do.
Yeah, I'm curious, for those of you who feel that you can relate to that, do you think there's a time where you just transition to that? Like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to live this out? Or do you think it just became who you were over time? Any thoughts? My thoughts would be, that it would come just, you can't find a day on the calendar. But is that the case, or anybody feel it differently? And other ways that Mr. White had laid out for pleasing God, serving, we talked about this some last week. There's so many opportunities. This is a serving church. That was something that became very obvious to us immediately. And I think there's an intentionality for that too, right? I mean, there's a reason this body is drawn together, and it's because they enjoy serving. Encouraging. This is, I got a voicemail today from someone in the membership that wanted to wish my son a happy birthday, and he'll call every one of our kids. This is another very intentional thing that people can do. I did want to speak briefly about writing. Does anybody journal here?
Anybody what?
Journal?
Oh.
Anyone journal? Sorry, my Madonna thing's coming off here, my headset.
Big one over there.
One, would you like to share? I didn't see who raised their hand. Would you like to share it all? You don't have to.
Sure, why not? Here you go.
I guess I am referred to as a storyteller. and they wonder why I can remember all that stuff. Well, when you get older, you really can't. So I started writing it all down and journaling it so that I could look back on my life and what things I did right, what things I did wrong, and what things could have changed better.
You know, I think if your brain is like mine, you kick the same things over in your mind over and over and over. Does anybody else do that? Yeah. I'm curious if your experience is like mine. The times when I have the most clarity is when I just sit down and I just write it out. And it's like all of a sudden, everything I was wrestling with, it just makes sense. Do you share that experience? Or is it?
No, what I do is I just process it and don't respond until no earlier than the next day to have gone through the thought process.
Yeah.
From minor to major.
Yeah.
Journaling will help with your prayer life too. Prayer journals, if you get, I don't know about anybody else, but there have been times in my life where I've got stuck in my prayer life. Maybe major events have happened in my life that just kind of strangled me in my prayer life. That there was a problem, me and God weren't talking real good, you know, and journaling, prayer journaling will help you get your thoughts in order and help you figure out what you want to say. And I have a funny feeling that God can read. And he probably knows what I'm writing now.
Yeah, there is something about, to me it's like writing out a math equation. I need to put all the symbols down because in my mind, some of these things contradict each other. But when I put them on paper, I can assign the appropriate weight to each thought and then let it compartmentalize where it needs to and make sense out of the muck. Paul?
When you were talking about journaling, the first thought that came to mind is every day intentionally writing something down, and I don't do that. But at 2:30 in the morning, when there's something on my mind that's not going away, I'll start writing, or it may be in the afternoon, but whatever. If it's keeping me from sleeping or doing something else, then that helps me to get those thoughts out, so I can go on about whatever I need to be doing, like sleeping.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I do think there's an intentional element to journaling, but at the same time, if you think I have to be intentional about doing it every day, I can't miss a day, then you're setting yourself up for failure. I've got a bunch of quarter-filled journals at home where I started and I think I got to where I needed to go and I just sort of put it aside. So, Mike?
Good luck trying to read my handwriting. I can't even. I have what you call essential tremor, and the meds that they have me on don't work, so they tried a Parkinson's drug, and that made it even worse. So.
Yeah. Arlen?
There's also technology where you can just speak into your phone or speak into a recorder and
Yeah.
save it that way, or even, save it some other way, on a computer, or there's always a way to translate, because I think paper, there's something about writing down for sure, but with technology that we have, you can take advantage of that too, where you get up, wake up in the middle of the night and hit record on something, because you talk to artists and really, really, really creative people, and they'll wake up in the morning, have middle of the night, have an idea, and have to write down, or have to draw something, or they're going to forget it.
Yeah.
So something to be said for technology too.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I'm also a verbal processor. I'm curious if some of you who are journalers also find yourself as verbal processors. And I think you can do that, like Arlen said, use that technology, speech to text. And I've even pulled up my email and just written myself an email if I had no other. So I think all those are helpful. I appreciate that. I think it's all about being intentional and living a life that is intentional about pleasing God. And I think that's part of how I compartmentalize these two things. How do I enjoy myself but also please God? Well, there's this intentional thing. But I think, we'll get to it. I want to wrestle with a verse real fast. We talked about winning the approval of God versus man. I want to read this whole chapter. I got to do a time check, but we're good so far. This is Psalm 62. I'll give you a second if you want to pull it up. As we're reading this, I just want you to think about this idea of pleasing God, but yet enjoying your life. It says, "My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. How long will you assault a man? Would all of you throw him down, this leaning wall, this tottering fence? They fully intend to topple him from his lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they curse. Find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. Low-born men are but a breath, the high-born are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together they are only a branch. Together they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortion or take pride in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. One thing God has spoken, two things I have heard, that you, O God, are strong, and that you, O Lord, are loving. Surely you will reward each person according to what he has done." It's a long passage, but as we think about this idea of pleasing God, enjoying life, winning the approval of God versus winning the approval of man, what sticks out to you in that verse? John, you're my default.
Okay. What I hear in that is he is totally into pleasing God. That's where he gets his joy, is in pleasing God. And I think that's a normal thing for us. It is for me. I know that when I do something that's, maybe it's difficult, maybe it's helping people and, doing some kind of good deed, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a little bit troublesome for you and take your time and all, but you always feel good afterwards. You always get that blessing for what you've done. There's a blessing you get when you do things for others.
Okay. Yeah, I wish I was that. I had this, as you're telling that story, I think about a story by myself. I shouldn't tell this. I had a friend that wanted me to help him move, and I had a pickup truck at the time. And so we drove all the way to Hermitage and made a load, and then we realized couldn't fit it all. I had to do it again. And I was so upset that I wasted my whole day. I sold the truck. I sold the truck so I wouldn't have to help anyone move ever again. So I wish I was... It doesn't doubt me that, but I know what you're saying though, that there's this, most of the time I regret pushing to get my way. I don't normally regret doing things for other people. At that one time I did, but other than that.
Where I was before I started coming here at Lebanon Road, when Katrina hit Burlington, Mississippi. Now, Katrina, in the newspapers and the TV stations, if you watched it, it hit New Orleans. It did not. It hit in Burlington, Mississippi, a little town that had absolutely no congregation of the church. A retired man from Corinth Church went down there and got things started, and then he called in several other people, And we had a crew of people who were retired and were carpenters and were going down there and built them a building. We went down, and the last time I was down there, they had a congregation that was averaging 40 or 50 in attendance, which is great for that area. But some of the people said, well, why don't we do this in a foreign country? I said, go down there. They're Cajuns. It's a foreign country. But you know, there was a lot of things, and I benefited by having something like that to fall back on.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, you're kind of talking about legacy, doing something for others that lasts a while, and I want to pivot to this, and I'm going to throw out an idea, and I can just go ahead and guarantee you that 99% of you are going to disagree with me on that, and that's totally fine. I don't even know that I agree with myself on this. But I'm gonna share with you something that helped me. I got to a point where I was really struggling with this idea of legacy. I don't think I've shared this in this class, have I? Have we talked about legacy to this extent? Tom, if I start saying something, just raise your hand, give me the sign, I had a friend who used to host a podcast, and he would always have different people on there, and they'd talk about various things. And at the end, he'd always ask that person, how do you want to be remembered? I haven't gone here yet, Tom? Okay. And so it was always the same stuff. I want to be remembered as a nice person, someone who would do things for others, kind, and different variations of that. And I was really struggling with, how do I want to answer that question? And I was going through a time where I had experienced a lot of failure and rejection, and so I knew that I wasn't going to be remembered by some people in those ways. And I finally found peace for me when I said, if from now on, if anyone says, how do you want to be remembered, I'm going to answer them, I don't care. Does that make sense? Like, I know that sounds kind of like, I don't care. I don't mean it that way. I just really mean, like, if someone says something good about me, I'm not going to know. Or it's not going to affect me. If someone says something bad about me, it's not going to affect me. And I thought, I know plenty of people who were good people, did a lot of good things. And they're remembered horribly by our society. I know people who are not very good people, and they are remembered as heroes. And so I started really wrestling with this, why am I so worried about how I'm going to be remembered? And that's when I started realizing I was putting too much of my own purpose and fulfillment in the approval of man instead of God. And when I read Psalm 62, I read about a person who says, these people lie about me. They don't like me. They're doing whatever they can to make me fail. But my soul finds rest in God alone. I started thinking about legacy in terms of, why am I only thinking about legacy on this earth? What if I think about legacy in terms of, has anybody read the Great Divorce? Anybody read that? Oh, man. Okay, we need to do a class on the Great Divorce. It's a C.S. Lewis book, and it's a fiction book where a bus of people are arriving into heaven. And they're meeting people for the first, some of them for the first time, some of them for the first time since they've separated from this earth. But there's this idea that we might encounter someone in heaven that says, hey, you don't know me, we never directly talked, but you did this. And because of that, the domino effect, I'm here. I'm here because of that. Does that make sense? I think, Healing Hands, Magi Project, those sorts of things. We may never know these people, but the impact is eternal. And I started thinking about, what if that's the legacy I worry about instead of the one here. Because I can guarantee you most of the people around here, I mean, the vast majority of the world, I don't think that they really have a right understanding of things anyway, so why does it matter if I'm thought of highly in their opinion? What do you think? Is that challenging? Is it bristle you, or it's okay to disagree?
I think that's Psalm 62. He was just concerned with what God thought, what God wanted to do.
Yeah, and John, I want to ask you, so is that selfish? Is it, if you can achieve that, what impact does it have on your life?
It keeps falling off. Ask me that question again now.
So let's, if a person were to actually be able to, I think it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm gonna concern myself with what God thinks of me, not what man thinks of me. It's another thing to live it out. But if someone can officially live that out, what impact, what effect would that have on their life?
I don't know, there's a couple of ways, I think, to look at that. If your entire focus is on God, and that's good, but you ignore, say, helping others, because you're thinking, well, I'm just going to keep my life straight here, I'm trying not to do anything wrong, I'm, trying to behave myself. Well, there's more to pleasing God than just focusing on yourself, what you do and don't do. Your influence on other people, I think, is very important. And when you do good things for other people, then your legacy to them is going to be good. So trying to ignore your legacy with people, that's probably not good, to completely ignore it. You've got to find this balance.
Yeah.
When you're doing good things that please God, you are going to be helping other people, and that's going to be a good influence on your legacy with others.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate all that.
It is, and that's kind of what we were, this theme of, we live in a world of extremes, but there's a mixture of in between. And I think that it's good to wrestle with those things, because the more I do that, the more I realize I can evaluate my own self and ask myself, am I doing this for what reason? Is it because I'm trying to win the approval of my fellow man, or is it because I'm trying to win the approval of God? And we've got a couple minutes. I'm going to, we're talking about this idea of enjoyment, and this is a tough one for me, being at peace with not getting a do-over in life. It's Caleb's birthday today, and I was putting the little memes in of the slide deck, and I found a video on the computer of him, little bitty, and I wish I had a do-over. I do. I wish I'd do it much better. Having peace with that is hard, and Mr. Whiting makes this comment that the more wisdom you have, the more contentment and peace you can have. And I think part of that's because you can realize, I'm not going to get a do-over, and I'm not going to dwell on that. I can just go from here. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I want to ask you, there's part of me that feels like the more wisdom you might have, there's also the more longing and pain. Because I think sometimes wisdom, in a way, opens our eyes up to the fact that we're not made for this world. I think sometimes we can realize a little more about what kind of world we really live in. And I was trying to figure out a way to make an example of that. So this is from Ecclesiastes chapter 4. It says, "Again I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who's not yet been, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. That's encouraging. How do we rationalize this? Saul was the wisest person in the world, and he wrote that. That's a tough one. Can everyone relate to those words, though? Tom.
I think it took me probably more than half my life to figure it out, but life is a series of moving targets, and about the time you figure out how to hit the target, all the rules change. You figure out how to parent a 3-year-old, and the next thing you know, they're not a 3-year-old anymore, they're a 4-year-old. And you got a whole new set of rules. You figure out how to be a newlywed husband or wife, and before long you're not a newlywed anymore, and it's just a different set of rules. And it seems like it's just a moving target all the way through life, that every stage you go through, there are things to learn. I mean, there are things that really frustrate you because it's new and you don't understand it. But as you work through it, and it's like God says, okay, you got a pretty good handle on that. We're moving on to the next thing. And then you're a rookie again. And it kind of is frustrating, but, you look back and it's kind of satisfying that, hey, I wasn't perfect at this, but I did okay. I got through that and kind of graduated on to the next thing. So, and God's with me all the way through it. So
Yeah.
It's trial and error.
Yeah. I can appreciate that even now, having multiple kids, because you realize the first one you just messed up. That was practice. But I think you're right that this is where I like journaling. If you're a journal, just wrestle with this on paper. Both of these things can be true, right? We can use our wisdom and our knowledge of God to have complete gratitude and appreciation for life and the relationships and the way God has moved in our life and the beauty of the world He created. And at the same time, we can also be in despair a little bit because we are in a fallen world, and it's not going to end the way we want it to end. And I think sometimes our world today will tell you, well, if you're not happy, there's something wrong and you need to get it fixed. And what I would say is, Solomon was the wisest person in the world. I think he knew how to achieve joy, and yet he was in despair at some time. So don't be upset with yourself if you find yourself in that predicament. And that's the second bell. We weren't everywhere tonight. I appreciate you all bearing with me and hanging with me. I know it was kind of all over the place, so thank you all. We'll see you next week.
Let me,
Guys, don't forget, it's daylight saving time then, this Saturday night. We get extra hours sleep.
Let me say just one thing right quick. One of Joe's last comments in these chapters was, retirement gives us the opportunity to walk closer to the Lord than ever before. And it really does. We just need to take advantage of it.